If you're looking to stay informed with the latest analysis on the stories that are shaping our world in the areas of foreign policy, national security, and domestic politics, consider becoming a member of the DSR Network. With the DSR Network podcasts, stay ahead of the curve on global affairs. Each episode across our more than 10 shows features top experts, policymakers, and thought leaders who break down complex issues into digestible, engaging conversations. From breaking news to historical context, we cover the latest topics that matter most. Whether it's the intricacies of international diplomacy, the latest in national security strategies, or the dynamics of U.S. politics, the DSR Network has you covered. Members receive an ad-free listening experience, bonus content for virtually all of our shows, an invitation to join the DSR Slack community, enhanced show notes for select podcasts, and much more. Visit thedsrnetwork.com/buy and enter code JULY2024 to receive 50% off the regular membership price for the first year or first month. That's thedsrnetwork.com/buy and code JULY2024. Thank you very much for your support.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. Donald Trump's campaign has just rolled out a new multi-million-dollar ad campaign in the swing states that blasts Kamala Harris's record on immigration. Oddly, it does so in part by mocking her dancing. That might be easy to dismiss as typical MAGA buffoonery, but underlying the link that the ad draws between Harris's dancing and her handling of immigration is a bigger argument that really demands a robust and serious Democratic response. Today we're discussing this with Douglas Rivlin, a senior official at the advocacy group America's Voice, and someone who has worked in the immigration space for decades and knows the issue as well as anyone out there. Thanks for coming on, Doug.
No problem. Thanks a lot, Greg, for having me on.
Okay, everybody. First, we want you to listen to a portion of this new Trump ad attacking Kamala Harris. Ready? Here goes.
This is America's border czar, and she's failed us. Under Harris, over 10 million illegally here. 250,000 Americans dead from fentanyl. Brutal migrant crimes. And ISIS now here.
So, listeners, you should know that the ad shows footage of Harris dancing in a very colorful shirt, something like a Hawaiian shirt, while talking about what Trump and MAGA constantly call the migrant invasion. It shows this footage twice. I think the subtext of this ad is supposed to be that Harris is dancing with the enemy, that she's partying with the enemy. Doug, you've tracked the right wing's messaging on this issue for many years. Am I being paranoid with that reading?
No, I think that's the image they're trying to send, that she's at a big party and celebrating the fact that immigrants are coming to the border. But, I mean, I think the real subtext is her offense against the MAGA team is that she's a black woman, right? And that she feels comfortable dancing at a party that was celebrating, I think, the 50th anniversary of hip-hop. That's, I think if Trump had his way with some voters in his coalition, all he needs to do is say, she's black, she's Asian, she's a woman, and that's enough of an ad for them to be turned off to her, at least with some of his followers.
I mean, about the ad's underlying argument, in March of 2021, Biden appointed Harris the task of addressing the root causes of migration from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. This is not a border job. She's not border czar. Securing the border falls to the Department of Homeland Security. Harris's assignment was a diplomatic one to address things like poverty and violence in the region that spurs migrations. Can you explain that fundamental difference a little bit?
Sure. I mean, just look at a map. The border is up here, and the Central American countries that she was working with are down here, and they're just two different places. And it was really two different strategies. For the Republicans and Trump, the immigration issue starts at the border and ends at the border, and it's all about the border. For the world and reality, it's actually a much more complicated issue. Vice President Harris went to Central American countries. She helped spur, I think, $5.5 billion worth of investment from private sector sources, focusing in on women entrepreneurs. The goal here is to make forced migration from the Northern Triangle countries in Central America less of a issue so that more people can stay home and survive in their own countries.
When Republicans equate the task of dealing with Central American root causes of migration with being just a quote-unquote border czar, that's actually a key tell. Many Republicans dismiss the very idea that we should be concerned with root causes of migration at all, because if you acknowledge that migration has root causes, like poverty, instability, violence in the region, and even climate change, well, then you're treating migrants as people who have understandable reasons to migrate and not mere invaders who are trying to rip us off and break in to commit crimes here. So let's talk about those root causes a bit. What are the root causes that have driven migration from Central America in recent years?
Look, we've had unprecedented migration worldwide, and we've had an unprecedented situation in Venezuela that looks like it might be getting worse, not better, partly driven by U.S. sanctions on countries like Venezuela and Haiti and Nicaragua and Cuba. We've had people driven out of their regions by natural disasters, by economic circumstances, by climate change, and all of that is not going to get better before it gets a lot worse. But what we also really seen is a lot of femicide, a lot of gang violence, a lot of targeting of people who have family in the United States to try and get their, extortion. And people are running for their lives in many cases. We have an asylum system designed to protect people who are running from certain types of persecution. It can include running from violence and the state's inability to protect you from violence, but that's not really what it was designed for, and it's not really designed for economic migrants. But we have no legal channels for people to come to the United States. We have a labor shortage, right? We have a farm worker labor shortage. We have a service and manufacturer labor shortage. It would be good if we had legal channels for immigration. Healthcare is a place where we really need more workers, elder care, child care. But we don't have the legal mechanisms to connect a willing workforce with jobs in the United States that help grow our economy and care for our elderly. And that's the price we're paying for the nativism of the Republican Party. They have fought tooth and nail for 30 years to prevent us from reforming our immigration system, not just to legalize the people who are here, but to allow legal immigration so that people can come and fill available jobs. They're against legal immigration. They're using quote-unquote illegal immigration as their smokescreen. And there are a couple other tells in that ad.
Well, I do want to point to something there. What creates illegal migration is the combination of the demand for labor, which we have, and also the lack of ways to get here legally. So it's not just the fact that the doors are closed. It's also that we need labor. And so people find a way to come and they get jobs. I want to dig into Harris's record a bit. The White House has said that Harris helped secure $4 billion in government aid to the region, plus, as you said earlier, $5 billion in commitments for private investment. According to Reuters, the number of migrants from those three countries encountered at the southern border fell from 90,000 in July 2021, just after she started this gig, to 25,000 this past May. That's a drop, but it's hard to know how directly those things are linked. What's your sense of the job, candidly, that Harris did on all this? And is there any real link between investments in the region and the falling numbers from those places coming to the border?
I think there are long-term gains to be had from investing in the region for a number of different reasons, including the stability of our region, the stability of our whole hemisphere, but also over time, reducing the pressures that are forcing people to migrate. I think it would be unlikely that you would see results in the short term. That said, the number of people who are crossing the border now are lower than when Trump was in the White House. One of the things that Biden and Harris have been trying to do is to give people an alternative to walking across Mexico. So they have advanced parole. They have the ability to apply for asylum status outside of the United States so that they don't have to take their chances of walking across a dangerous Mexican desert, for example. And Republicans still say that's illegal immigration, right? They're still saying it's pretty much the definition of illegal for a Republican is Latin American or person of color. So when you have the Speaker of the House talking about illegal immigration and the numbers of people who have been given permission by our government to come to this country and seek asylum, he still calls them, quote unquote, illegals.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get to the politics of this by way of what you just said. The politics of this are hard for Democrats. Disapproval of Biden and Harris' handling of immigration is high, and Trump is more trusted on the issue by large margins. But the problem is, as you point out, a president can't manage this issue in the context of the current legal framework and with the resources Congress provides. The courts are backlogged, and by the way, that's why Trump also failed. As president, he released hundreds of thousands of migrants who had crossed the border into the interior as well. He released them into the interior because every president must do this. There's no other choice. I don't understand why that's not part of the discussion. I mean, by Republicans' own metric, Trump was a massive failure and facilitated a huge invasion. But that aside, the public sees a mismanaged border and holds the people in charge responsible. And I think that's a big reason for Trump's advantage on the issue right now. Is there a way for Democrats to talk about these basic facts?
Yes, and I think they really would be on very solid ground to lean in and be on offense. Look, the Republicans have tried to scuttle border security legislation. They've tried to sue so that people who have legal status will lose their legal status, thereby increasing the number of people here without status. They have tried to reduce the number of people who can come here with permission of the government in advance. They are trying to drive up chaos. They are trying to drive up the numbers at the border, and that is their political strategy. It's not a good border management strategy. It's not a good security strategy, but they're not interested in that. They're interested in voter activation, and they do use terms like you use, like invasion and replacement theory, and this notion that people are coming today so that they can vote in November, and these other crazy ideas that they have. And we know that that stuff leads to violence. We know that there are people out there who hear that and believe it and drive 10 hours across Texas to kill 23 people at a Walmart in Texas just 5 years ago this weekend, who drive to the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh and kill 10 people, and drive to a grocery store in an African-American neighborhood in Buffalo and kill 10 more. So there is a real downstream cost of trading in these kinds of white nationalist conspiracy theories, like the invasion rhetoric, like the conspiracy theory about replacement. The reality is all of this stuff needs to be taken out of politics. I mean, when you say they don't have any choice but to release people at the border, we do have choices. We have a choice to create an immigration system that matches the 21st century.
Right. But
we refuse to do that.
My point is that in the current context of the framework of laws that Congress has left presidents with, wrongly in my view, there aren't a lot of options. And so what frustrates me about this whole debate is that Trump was very unpopular on this issue when he was president, right? This is something that people forget. And whenever you bring this up, the response is always something like, oh, that was just a reaction to child separations. No, Trump's policies were unpopular. His restrictionist policies were unpopular. Approval of him was very low on the issue, and that's partly because he was in charge then, and the public saw a mismanaged situation. Now, Biden is in charge, and the public sees a mismanaged situation, and they forget that the last guy screwed it all up even worse, and just blame the people in charge now. And I think this is a really difficult political problem.
It is a difficult problem because you always blame the current guy for whatever is going on, even if they have very little agency. And the blame all falls squarely on Republicans in Congress, who for 30 years have blocked immigration reform that would have a 21st century immigration system that matches the needs of our society and our economy. And they've just been clearly wanting to make politics out of this rather than wanting to make policy. But the Republicans are very much out of step with where the American people are on these issues. The American people think legal immigration is actually a good thing and should be allowed within limits, but people should be allowed to come with visas. Republicans are against that. They think that people who have lived here for a long time, like the people who have lived here for 10 years who are married to U.S. citizens, that President Biden recently took action on, that they should be allowed to pursue legal status and be able to work and be able to live and see their kids grow up here in the United States because they've lived here for a long time. And frankly, we're not going to deport them. And the American people are right, and Republicans are against that. They want to have an immigration system that allows for asylum so that people get a day in court and go through a process of American justice about whether they fit with the asylum laws of our country or they don't. And a lot of them won't, and a lot of them don't, and a lot of them get deported. We're pushing a lot of people out of this country right now. But that's where the American people are. The Republicans want to shut it all down. They want to make sure that nobody gets their day in court and that we just have chaos on the border so that they can say Democrats are soft on crime or whatever other arguments they're going to make, even though there's no connection between crime and immigration. It's all a circular logic, but it really is about creating an other and then attaching to that, I'm the person who's going to defend you from that other. And that is, that go back to Lee Atwater, go back to Jesse Helms. This has all been the same strategy. So when you see pictures of Harris dancing at a party, she's an other, and he's going to defend the country from others like her.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
The subtext.
Right. And so at the same time, though, there really is a largely intractable problem in that dealing with the root causes of migrations is hard. Jonathan Blitzer had a great piece in The New Yorker reporting on Harris's efforts in the region. One of the problems was negotiating with these governments that are awash in corruption or instability or both. I think there's been more reporting suggesting that despite all these efforts made by Harris and the administration and Biden as vice president before, as you pointed out, a lot of this just is like a drop in the bucket to what's needed. And so, I mean, the big picture here is, granting everything you're saying about Republicans, they are part of the problem. There's also this other intractable problem, right? I mean, what do we do about that?
Immigration is a problem that is not going away. People are going to be on the move for the foreseeable future. The economics of the world, the ability to move, the flow of information, and things like global warming are going to put pressures on people to move. The question is, do we want to manage it intelligently or do we want to suppress it ineffectively? We have so far been trying to suppress it ineffectively. We've been trying to close the door rather than open sluice ways that allow the flow of immigrants. I hate to use a water metaphor because that's what the bad guys always do when they talk about floods, but it sort of works. Let's think about that. We need to have something that takes the pressure off of the border so that people have legal channels, so that we get back to the kind of migration that we used to have, which is that people came here for a few years, they earned money, they went back home if that's what they chose. If they got married to someone here, there was a way for them to stay. And we should get back to a system that is much more connected to the reality of how people migrate and the realities of the world. That's not saying that we need to have open borders. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. We need to have controlled borders with systems and the rule of law, and Republicans have been against that. They want to make sure that we don't have those systems in place. They voted against all the kinds of border security infrastructure and investment in ports of entry where fentanyl is coming in and where we screen for fentanyl, where we put trucks through giant X-ray machines. They voted against all that kind of border security in the infrastructure bill. They would like to have the chaos at the border. And so I think there's a majority of Americans who think immigration is a good thing. It should be controlled and orderly. It should be safe and people should have rights, but we should also have rights here in this country to determine who's coming and who's not coming. And it should fit the needs of our economy. Yeah. And that's the majority of the American people that want to have that kind of system, and Republicans are standing in the way.
So, Doug, the Trump messaging tries to slot this into a strong versus weak frame. Yep. Harris is either in league with the enemy invaders, dancing with them, dancing with glee at their invasion, or too weak to prevent them from overrunning us. But strength is not the answer on this issue. You need a combination of more asylum restrictions, as Biden has already put in place, plus big investments in processing asylum seekers, plus broader legal pathways, as you said, for migrants to apply from afar so they don't show up at the border. Biden has broadened legal pathways with parole programs admitting tens of thousands monthly from Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Haiti. But you need more on this front. You need Congress to do it. And on top of all that, you need more work addressing instability and violence in Central America. So how did Democrats talk about this? You know, their message is Trump is strong, Harris is the weak other, right? I mean,
it's not a question of strong versus weak. It's a question of smart versus stupid. And there are smart things that we can do to manage immigration on our own terms for our own country. And there are stupid things that kind of sound good and get a cheer out of a MAGA audience that actually are going to hurt us. I didn't think I was going to live long enough to see a National Party convention where people were calling for mass deportation, but I saw it in Milwaukee, and it's the level of damage that's going to do to the U.S. economy is staggering. It's going to drive up inflation. It's going to drive down wages and employment for American workers. For every 1 million deported, we're going to lose 88,000 jobs for natives. For every million deported, we're going to lose 8.9 billion in taxes. It's just a coordinated effort to shoot ourselves, not just in the foot, but in the heart. They want to kill our economy. And so they've touted out this idea that we're going to drive out 11 million people, including those same people that have been married for 10 years to U.S. citizens and have, DACA or who are dreamers, et cetera. They are selling an agenda that is really dumb. People feel it emotionally because they want someone to do something about immigration. And that leaves a Democratic size hole for the vice president, for the party to step in and say, this is what I think we should do. We should have legal immigration so that people are coming with visas and we get to decide who's coming. We should have an investment in Central America and around the world so that we're reducing the pressures that are causing people to migrate. All of the things that you said. We should invest in border security, but not in a way that militarizes our border and over-polices border communities, but in a way that actually drives people to ports of entry so that they can be vetted and brought into our country in a orderly way.
Right. Well,
not an unlimited way, but an orderly way.
Right. So Trump wants to empty the country of undocumented immigrants using potentially the military, National Guard, putting them in camps, wrecking local economies and tearing up communities. He wants to dramatically slash legal immigration, just wall everybody out, essentially declare we have no responsibility for outsiders at all. But that's not the answer. It's the opposite of a solution. I mean, as you point out, the less we do about root causes elsewhere, the more there will be migration. And so the wall has to get higher and higher. But Doug,
right. Contrast that though with a California senator who's fluent in these issues, who has a lot of experience as a prosecutor, as a senator, and as a vice president in what does work and what doesn't work. She's fought cross-border international crime. She was a champion of the DREAM Act and Dreamers when she was in the Senate. She was one of the first people to call for investigations into the family separation policies of the Biden administration. she's someone who knows about these issues, which gives us a huge advantage as for the Democratic side. I shouldn't say us, but them, a ability to talk about these issues in a rational way that makes a lot more sense than what Trump is selling.
But with Trump running millions in ads showing her dancing with glee at the invasion, is there a way to bust through that and speak emotionally and clearly about this issue in a way that counters that?
Yeah, I mean, look at the Olympic team. Look at all of the brown and black faces that are representing the United States, just the gymnastics team. I mean, that stuff wouldn't be true if it weren't for immigration. It's something we feel in our core. We lose sight of it all the time. But the fact that we have a multiracial democracy, that we are the strongest country because we came from all over, because we're mutts and we have put together a pretty darn good country, all of those things we need to remind people of. Trump sees the country as fundamentally weak, it's fundamentally on the decline, and he sees the U.S. as suckers. And he sees veterans who fight for our country as suckers. He sees anybody who pays taxes as suckers. And that is something that we should be able to beat easily. We need to define what it is that we're looking at when we think about the nation of the future. And it's not a country where Americans are fighting against other Americans. It's a country where we're joining together to solve problems. Biden has it right. When he says Americans can solve problems when they put their mind to it, he's absolutely right. And I think his vice president, Ms. Harris, is going to lean into that feeling and be able to break through the cynicism and just the ugliness of the Trump campaign.
I sure hope so. Douglas Rivlin, we said at the outset that you really knew this issue, and you certainly didn't disappoint. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Everybody, make sure to check out some good new content up at TNR.com. Parker Malloy explaining how Elon Musk is trying to rob his trans daughter of her inspiring story, and Alex Shepard on J.D. Vance's violent forward to the Project 2025 leader's new book. We'll see y'all tomorrow. You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler and the DSR Network.